Thunder cracked across the sky as rain pelted against the windows of the Child Protective Services building. Inside a dimly lit office, 3 identical 8-year-old girls huddled together, their small hands clasped tightly, refusing to be separated. Emma, the eldest by 5 minutes, positioned herself protectively in front of her sisters, her young face set with determination beyond her years. "But girls, please understand," the social worker pleaded, her voice strained with exhaustion. "We have 3 different foster families ready to take you in. Good families with experience." No, Emma's voice was firm despite her trembling lips. Behind her, Olivia clutched their mother's worn teddy bear, tears streaming down her face, while Ava's wheezing breaths grew more labored with anxiety. Through the office window, John Matthews watched the scene unfold, his heart heavy in his chest. At 60, he'd seen his share of tragedy, but something about these 3 little girls struck a chord deep within him. Perhaps it was the way they clung to each other, or the fierce protective instinct in Emma's eyes that reminded him of himself at their age. 24 hours earlier, the girls had made their desperate escape from St. Mary's orphanage. Through the pouring rain, they had run hand in hand, their small feet splashing through puddles, Emma leading the way while supporting Ava, who struggled to breathe. They had found temporary shelter in an abandoned building, sharing a single sandwich between them, making whispered promises to never let anyone separate them. "Your mother would want you to have the best chance at life," another social worker attempted, reaching for Ava. "Don't touch her," Emma shouted, backing her sisters into a corner. "Mom promised we'd stay together." She promised. John's fingers tightened around the documents in his hand, newspaper clippings about the girl's mother, a beloved elementary school teacher who had succumbed to cancer 4 months ago, and troubling reports about conditions at St. Mary's orphanage. His lawyer's warning echoed in his mind. "John, taking on 3 traumatized children at your age, it could destroy everything you built." But as he watched Olivia gently wiping Ava's tears while Emma stood guard, John knew he had to make a choice. These weren't just any children, they were survivors, fighters, sisters bound by love and loss. The question wasn't whether he should help them, but whether he could protect them from the dark forces that seemed determined to tear them apart. Taking a deep breath, John stepped forward and opened the office door. The room fell silent as he entered, all eyes turning to him. Emma's defensive stance faltered slightly as she studied this tall, well-dressed stranger with kind eyes that somehow reminded her of her mother's. "Mr. Matthews," the social worker began, "this is a private. I would like to apply for emergency temporary guardianship of all 3 girls," John stated firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. What he didn't know was that this single decision would set in motion a chain of events that would uncover deadly secrets, test the limits of love, and redefine the meaning of family. The Matthews mansion stood like a lonely sentinel on Oakwood Hill, its Victorian architecture a testament to old money and tradition. Though meticulously maintained by a small staff, the sprawling estate carried an unmistakable air of solitude that mirrored its owner's life. John Matthews' footsteps echoed through empty hallways adorned with priceless artwork, each step a reminder of the space between wealth and happiness. In his private study, walls of mahogany shelves housed hundreds of leather-bound books, their spines barely touched. A massive desk, inherited from his adoptive father, dominated the room. Upon it sat neatly organized stacks of donation requests and charity proposals, each one carefully annotated in John's precise handwriting. The morning light filtered through tall windows, illuminating framed newspaper clippings that chronicled his journey from successful businessman to renowned philanthropist. "Your coffee, Sir Jenkins," his butler of 20 years, placed a steaming cup on the desk. He paused, studying his employer's tired face. "Another sleepless night?" John nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of a particularly troubling report about inner-city education failures. "How many children slipped through the cracks, Jenkins? How many could we save if the system worked properly?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. On the wall behind his desk, a single photograph stood out among the accolades and certificates, a black and white image of a skinny 10-year-old boy standing in front of St. Mary's orphanage. Few knew this was John himself, or that the same boy who once wore donated clothes now controlled a fortune dedicated to helping others. Beyond the study's windows, the mansion's grounds stretched for acres, immaculately landscaped, yet eerily empty. The Olympic-sized pool had never seen a children's party, the tennis courts remained unused, and the garden's winding paths knew only John's solitary morning walks. Despite his wealth, or perhaps because of it, John Matthews lived in splendid isolation. His public image painted him as the city's greatest benefactor, funding hospitals, scholarships, and countless charitable initiatives. Society columns speculated about his bachelor status, wondering why such an eligible man remained unmarried. None guessed that behind the polished facade lay a deep-seated fear of connection, born from years in the orphanage system. Jenkins watched as John rose and moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. The board meeting for the Children's Hospital Foundation has been moved to 3:00, the butler reminded gently. And the mayor called again about the Civic Center donation. John barely nodded, his mind elsewhere. The mansion's silence felt oppressive today, the emptiness of its rooms more noticeable than ever. Perhaps it was the recent dreams that had been haunting him, memories of shared dormitories, of friendships forged in hardship, of a time before wealth isolated him from the world he now tried to help from a distance. Jenkins, John said suddenly, have you ever wondered if all this he gestured to the grandeur around him, IF it, means anything without someone to share it with? Before tragedy struck, room 203 of Lincoln Elementary School was filled with laughter and love. Sarah Pearson taught 3rd grade there, her classroom a vibrant space where 3 identical little girls would often sit after hours, doing homework while their mother graded papers. Emma, Olivia, and Ava Pearson were inseparable, not just by birth but by a bond that seemed to transcend ordinary sisterhood. Emma, older by mere minutes, had always been the protector. Even at 8, she carried herself with a gravity that spoke of wisdom beyond her years. While other children played at recess, Emma would keep a watchful eye on her sisters, ready to rush to Ava's side at the first sign of an asthma attack or comfort Olivia when playground teasing became too much. Her mother's friends often remarked how she'd inherited Sarah's quiet strength and nurturing instinct. Olivia, the middle triplet, was the most sensitive of the 3. She felt everything deeply, crying at sad stories and beaming with joy at happy endings. Her mother's teddy bear, a worn creature named Mr. Whiskers, became her constant companion after Sarah's diagnosis. She would clutch it during thunderstorms, hospital visits, and now in the darkest moments at the orphanage. Olivia's teachers noted her exceptional empathy, how she could sense when other children were upset and offer silent comfort. Ava, the youngest, had always been fragile physically but possessed an artist's soul. Her asthma meant frequent hospital visits, but she turned each stay into an opportunity to create, decorating her hospital room with drawings of the family she adored. Her artwork captured their life before Sunday picnics in the park, movie nights cuddled on the worn living room couch, and their mother's radiant smile as she taught her class. Their small apartment above Henderson's bookstore had been filled with love, if not luxury. Sarah worked extra tutoring jobs to make ends meet, determined to give her daughters every opportunity. Weekends were sacred family time, baking cookies, reading stories, or simply being together. The girls shared a room with 3 narrow beds, but most nights they would push them together, falling asleep holding hands. When Sarah first began coughing, she dismissed it as a simple cold. The girls remembered the night they found her collapsed in the kitchen, how Emma had remembered the emergency number while Olivia held their mother's hand, and Ava ran to get the neighbors. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt: aggressive lung cancer already spreading. Sarah fought hard, teaching through the pain, hiding her suffering behind bright smiles and cheerful lessons, but her daughters knew. They saw how she grew thinner, heard her muffled cries at night, noticed how climbing the stairs to their apartment left her breathless. Still, she never stopped planning for their future, setting aside what little she could for their education. On her final night, Sarah gathered her daughters close. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice weak but determined. "Promise you'll always stay together. You're stronger together. Love each other. Protect each other." They made the promise through tears, not knowing how soon and how severely that vow would be tested. St. Mary's Orphanage cast a long shadow over Cherry Street, its red brick facade masking the darkness within. Mrs. Victoria Harker, the director, ruled the institution with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove of religious piety and false benevolence. Her office, decorated with certificates of excellence and photographs of smiling children, served as the command center for her carefully orchestrated deception. From the moment the Pearson triplets arrived, Mrs. Harker saw an opportunity. 3 at once, she smiled coldly, studying the grieving girls. How? Fortunate her first act was to separate them, placing Emma on the 3rd floor, Olivia in the basement dormitory, and Ava in the east wing. Children need to develop independence, she explained to the concerned social worker, her voice dripping with practiced concern. The daily routine at St. Mary's began at 5 a.m. with a harsh bell. Children scrambled to make their beds with military precision, knowing that any wrinkle meant skipping breakfast. The meals, when served, consisted of watery porridge and stale bread, though the accounting books showed substantial food budgets. During official inspections, fresh fruit would appear mysteriously, only to vanish once the visitors left. Mrs. Harker took particular pleasure in punishing the Pearson girls for their attempts to see each other. Emma's midnight missions to check on her sisters earned her long hours locked in the reflection room, a windowless closet beneath the stairs. Olivia's tears for her siblings resulted in the confiscation of Mr. Whiskers, her mother's teddy bear. Ava's asthma attacks, triggered by stress and poor conditions, were dismissed as attention-seeking behavior. The staff, carefully selected by Mrs. Harker, turned blind eyes to the abuse. Those who questioned the practices found themselves swiftly unemployed, their professional reputations mysteriously tarnished. Miss Thompson, a young nurse who attempted to report the conditions, disappeared overnight, leaving behind whispered warnings among the children. Yet beneath the surface of Mrs. Harker's rigid control, a current of resistance flowed. Older children passed secret messages between siblings, sharing scraps of food and whispered words of comfort. The night janitor, Mr. Rodriguez, would sometimes accidentally leave doors unlocked, allowing brief midnight reunions. Even Mrs. Peterson, the cook, occasionally slipped extra portions to the hungrier children when she could. The building itself seemed to hold secrets. Hidden passages created during Prohibition connected various parts of the orphanage, their existence known only to a few. These narrow corridors would later prove crucial to the triplets' escape, though they didn't know it yet. The ancient walls absorbed the sounds of children's tears, while well-maintained public areas presented a facade of care and comfort to occasional visitors. Most disturbing were the financial discrepancies that no one dared question. Donations disappeared into mysterious accounts, while children wore threadbare clothes and used damaged school supplies. The annual charity ball, St. Mary's flagship fundraising event, generated substantial income that somehow never translated into improved conditions for the residents. For the Pearson triplets, St. Mary's became a crucible that tested their promise to their mother. Each day brought new challenges to their vow to stay together, yet also strengthened their resolve to escape. The morning after John Matthews' unexpected intervention at Child Protective Services, his attorney William Anderson paced the mahogany-paneled study, legal documents scattered across the antique desk. "John, what you're proposing isn't just complicated, it's unprecedented. A single man your age, seeking emergency guardianship of 3 traumatized children? The courts will scrutinize every aspect of your life." John sat quietly, watching the sunrise paint shadows across the city skyline. "We both know what happens to siblings in the system, William. They'll be separated, passed around like unwanted parcels. I won't let that happen." The legal machinery lurched into motion with brutal efficiency. By noon, representatives from Child Protective Services arrived for an emergency home inspection. They meticulously documented every room of the Matthews mansion, their comments ranging from concern about the swimming pool's safety to questions about the lack of child-sized furniture. Detective Michael Lawson, assigned to oversee the case, brought another layer of complexity. "Mr. Matthews, your reputation is impeccable, but we need to understand your motivation. 3 young girls, no family connection. People will talk." The media caught wind of the story by evening. Local news vans parked outside the mansion's gates, their cameras capturing every movement. Headlines ranged from sympathetic to sensational billionaire's bid to save sisters, competed with questions raised about bachelors' interest in orphaned triplets. Mrs. Harker seized the opportunity. Granting tearful interviews about her concern for her girls, she painted a picture of St. Mary's as a loving haven, suggesting that the triplets' escape was a result of unprocessed grief, rather than abuse. "They need professional help," she insisted, "not the indulgence of a wealthy man's whim." The first court hearing was set for the following week. John's legal team worked around the clock, preparing character witnesses, financial statements, and proposed care plans. They transformed the mansion's east wing into a children's paradise, complete with a schoolroom, playroom, and individual bedrooms decorated in each girl's favorite colors. But the opposition mounted. Conservative family groups filed briefs questioning the propriety of the arrangement. Child psychology experts debated the wisdom of placing traumatized children with an inexperienced guardian. The state appointed a special investigator to examine both John's background and the conditions at St. Mary's. And through it all, John remained steadfast. Each morning, he visited the girls at the temporary foster home where they'd been placed pending the hearing. He brought books, art supplies, and most importantly, his unwavering commitment to keeping them together. Emma, wise beyond her years, watched him with calculating eyes. "Why are you helping us?" she asked one morning, her sisters listening intently nearby. John knelt to meet her gaze. "Because 30 years ago I was you. Different orphanage, different circumstances, but the same fear, the same loneliness. Nobody fought for me then. But I can fight for you now." As the hearing date approached, William made one final attempt to dissuade his client. "John, there's still time to withdraw. Your reputation, your foundation's work, everything you've built could be at risk." John's response was simple: "Some things are worth the risk." In the solitude of his study, John Matthews confronted his deepest fears. Each night, after endless meetings with lawyers and social workers, he questioned his ability to be what these children needed. The weight of responsibility pressed against his chest as he stared at the 3 small beds he'd ordered for rooms that had known only silence for decades. "Jenkins," he called out one evening, his voice betraying unusual vulnerability. "Did I have any idea how to be a father when I started this?" His faithful butler paused in his duties, choosing his words carefully. "Sir, if I may, sometimes the best parents are those who question their abilities the most." The girls, meanwhile, fought their own battles in the temporary foster home. Emma lay awake each night, listening to Olivia's muffled sobs and Ava's wheezing breaths, the burden of protection heavy on her young shoulders. She struggled with trusting John's promises, having learned the hard way that adult guarantees often shattered like glass. Olivia retreated further into herself, clutching her mother's teddy bear with increasing desperation. During supervised visits with John, she barely spoke, her eyes constantly darting to exits as if expecting Mrs. Harker to materialize and drag them back to St. Mary's. The child psychologist noted growing anxiety in her sessions, manifesting in nightmares and occasional panic attacks. Ava's health deteriorated under the stress. Her asthma attacks increased, each episode a reminder of their vulnerability. She expressed her fears through drawings, dark, haunting images of separated beds and locked doors that brought tears to her social worker's eyes. Yet when she drew John, she always placed him between the sisters, like a shield against the darkness. John's dreams became populated with memories of his own time in the system. He remembered the taste of institutional food, the sound of crying in dormitories, the crushing loneliness of being just another face in a sea of unwanted children. These recollections, long buried under years of success, surfaced with renewed clarity, driving him forward even as they tormented his nights. Detective Lawson noticed the toll it took on all of them. During his mandatory visits, he observed John's increasing exhaustion and the girls' conflicting desires to trust and protect themselves. "They're survivors," he told John privately. "Like you were. But survival instincts don't fade easily." The media scrutiny added another layer of pressure. Each public appearance required careful orchestration. John struggled to shield the girls from cameras while presenting a confident face to the world. Emma, ever vigilant, developed a habit of positioning herself between her sisters and any stranger with a phone, her small face set in a defensive mask. One particularly difficult evening, after Ava suffered a severe asthma attack, John found himself in his car, outside the foster home, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The desire to simply take the girls and disappear warred with his understanding that only by working within the system could he truly protect them. "Please," he whispered to the photograph of Sarah Pearson on his dashboard, "help me be strong enough for them." Behind closed doors at St. Mary's Orphanage, Mrs. Harker orchestrated her counterattack with calculated precision. Her mahogany desk was covered with newspaper clippings about John Matthews, each article annotated in her sharp handwriting. A phone call interrupted her research, the voice on the other end speaking in hushed tones. "Yes, I understand the risks," she replied, her fingers tightening around the receiver. "But Matthews is becoming a problem. He's asking too many questions about our financial arrangements." The implied threat hung in the air, like poison. William Anderson, John's trusted attorney of 15 years, sat in a dimly lit bar across town, nursing a scotch and a guilty conscience. A manila envelope stuffed with photographs lay before him, images of the Pearson triplets, their mother, and documents that could destroy everything Mrs. Harker had built. The choice between loyalty and money had never felt more stark. The local press, led by ambitious reporter Rebecca Sterling, began digging deeper into John's past. Single man, never married, suddenly interested in 3 little girls, she mused to her editor. There's a story here, and it's not the fairy tale everyone's selling. Her articles grew increasingly skeptical, raising questions about John's motives and fitness as a guardian. Conservative family advocacy groups rallied against the proposed guardianship. The Reverend Thomas Parker of the Traditional Family Values Coalition held press conferences on the courthouse steps. "Children need a mother and a father," he proclaimed to nodding supporters. "Mr. Matthews' wealth cannot substitute for proper family structure." Detective Lawson discovered troubling connections as he investigated the case. Bank records showed suspicious transfers between St. Mary's accounts and offshore entities. When he tried to probe deeper, he received a warning visit from his superior. "Some cases are better left alone," Michael the chief advised, not meeting his eyes. Mrs. Harker's influence reached far. City council members who had benefited from her discretion began questioning the fast-tracking of John's guardianship application. The judge assigned to the case received letters highlighting John's age, his bachelor status, and suggesting improper motivations. Anonymous calls to Child Protective Services raised concerns about the girl's safety in John's care. Each visit, each interview, each inspection seemed designed to wear down his resolve. The system that had failed to protect the girls at St. Mary's now worked with ruthless efficiency to prevent their escape from it. Most disturbing were the whispers in wealthy circles, suggestions that John's business interests might suffer if he persisted. Corporate partners began cancelling meetings. Charitable foundations delayed grant approvals. The pressure mounted subtly but inexorably. Through it all, William wrestled with his conscience. The envelope in his hands could expose everything, but using it meant betraying John's trust and possibly endangering the girls further. Each night, he told himself he was protecting them by staying silent. Each morning, the lie tasted more bitter. Mrs. Harker made one final call that evening. "Proceed with the plan," she ordered. "Matthews needs to learn that some battles aren't worth fighting." As she hung up, a photo on her desk caught her eye, herself as a young girl, standing beside Sarah Pearson, both smiling at a long-forgotten swimming competition. The first breakthrough came during a thunderstorm. John had been granted supervised visitation at the foster home when the power failed, plunging the house into darkness. Amid the chaos of flickering emergency lights, he heard Ava's breathing become labored with panic. Without hesitation, he navigated through the darkness, found her inhaler, and held her hand until her breathing steadied. "You remembered where I keep it?" Ava whispered, surprise evident in her voice. John squeezed her small hand gently. "Of course. I remember everything about you girls." In the dim light, Emma watched this interaction with cautious approval, noting how he'd known exactly what to do without making a fuss. These small moments began to accumulate like precious gems. During another visit, Olivia hesitantly showed John her mother's teddy bear, Mr. Whiskers. "He's getting worn," she admitted softly. The next day, John arrived with a small sewing kit and, under Olivia's careful supervision, helped repair the bear's loose arm. His careful stitches spoke louder than any promises. The supervised visits evolved into a comfortable routine. John would arrive each afternoon, bringing books or art supplies. He never pushed for affection but remained consistently present. Emma began testing him with small requests, watching to see if he'd follow through. When she mentioned liking astronomy, John arranged for a portable telescope to be set up in the foster home's backyard. Detective Lawson, observing these interactions, noted the subtle changes. The girls no longer flinched when John entered the room. They began saving stories to tell him, drawing pictures for his office. Even Emma's protective stance softened, though her watchful gaze never completely disappeared. The turning point came during a mandatory therapy session. The child psychologist had suggested a trust-building exercise where each person shared their biggest fear. John went first, his vulnerability deliberate and genuine. "I'm afraid of failing you," he admitted, "of not being enough to keep you safe and happy." Emma, after a long pause, spoke for her sisters. "We're afraid of being separated again, of trusting and being wrong." The honesty in her young voice filled the room. Olivia clutched Mr. Whiskers tighter, and Ava reached for Emma's hand. John knelt before them, meeting each pair of eyes. "I can't promise that life will be perfect," he said carefully, "but I can promise that everything I am, everything I have, will go toward keeping you together and safe. You're not alone anymore." That evening, as John prepared to leave, Olivia did something unprecedented. She walked up to him and, without a word, pressed Mr. Whiskers into his hands. "He helps with bad dreams," she explained quietly. "Maybe he can help you too." The social worker, watching from the doorway, made a note in her report about the interaction. Later, she would testify that this moment marked the first real sign that healing was possible. The trust being built wasn't just between John and the girls, but between 3 wounded children and the possibility of a future different from their past. The first day at Riverside Elementary School revealed the harsh realities ahead. Despite John's careful preparations and the administration's promises of discretion, whispers followed the Pearson triplets through the hallways. Parents pulled their children aside, media vans lingered at the school gates, and teachers struggled to maintain normalcy in classrooms suddenly charged with tension. Emma confronted the first bully during morning recess. A 5th-grade boy, parroting his parents' gossip, made insinuations about John's motives. Emma's response was swift and fierce, resulting in a trip to the principal's office. John arrived to find her sitting stoically, knuckles bruised but pride intact. "You told us to stand up for what's right," she reminded him. The mixture of pride and concern on his face spoke volumes. Ava's asthma attacks increased with the stress. During art class, cruel comments about their bought daddy triggered such a severe episode that an ambulance was called. John abandoned a crucial business meeting to race to the hospital, arriving to find Olivia in tears and Emma arguing with medical staff about staying together. The incident made the evening news, complete with unauthorized photos of the girls in distress. The public scrutiny intensified. Every shopping trip became an ordeal of dodging photographers and avoiding confrontations. When John took the girls to a local diner for breakfast, other patrons openly stared and whispered. The owner, torn between old friendship with John and pressure from judgmental customers, struggled to act normally. At home, nightmares plagued all 3 girls. They would wake screaming for their mother or trying to escape imagined captors. John learned to respond to the slightest sound, spending countless nights in a chair between their beds, reading stories until dawn. His business colleagues noticed his exhaustion but knew better than to comment. Detective Lawson brought more concerning news. Mrs. Harker had been seen near the school, watching from her car. Though no laws were broken, her presence sparked fresh anxiety. The girls began refusing to go outside for recess, huddling together in the library instead. The financial impact became evident as several major investors withdrew from John's latest project, citing concerns about his focus and judgment. The foundation's board members questioned the wisdom of his actions, suggesting he step back temporarily. John's response was unwavering. "If you want my resignation, just say so." Social services conducted surprise inspections with increasing frequency. Each visit felt like an inquisition, with every aspect of their developing family life scrutinized and questioned. The girls learned to keep their rooms spotless, to answer questions carefully, to present the perfect image of adjustment while their anxiety simmered beneath the surface. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Olivia broke down. "Maybe it would be easier for everyone if we just left," she sobbed, clutching Mr. Whiskers. The confession shattered John's heart, but before he could respond, Emma spoke up. "We're not leaving," she declared firmly. "This is our family now. We fight for family." John gathered them close, these 3 brave souls who had chosen to trust him despite everything. Together he promised softly, "No matter what comes next, we face it together." Detective Michael Lawson's investigation into St. Mary's Orphanage had begun as a professional obligation, but as he uncovered layers of corruption, it became a personal mission. Late one evening, he arrived at the Matthews mansion with a box of files and a determined expression. "We need to talk about Sarah Pearson's last days," he told John gravely. Miss Anderson, the girl's former third-grade teacher, became an unexpected ally. She organized a petition signed by hundreds of colleagues and parents who had known Sarah, testifying to her dedication as a mother. More importantly, she provided essential emotional context during court evaluations. "These girls aren't just their trauma," she insisted. "They're Sarah's daughters, bright, loving, and incredibly resilient." The neighborhood's response evolved from initial suspicion to fierce protectiveness. Mrs. Chen from the corner bakery started sending fresh bread every morning. Mr. Rodriguez, the retired mailman, volunteered as a crossing guard specifically to watch over the girls' walk to school. Even the local coffee shop owner, Dave, banned paparazzi from his premises after they frightened Ava into an asthma attack. A turning point came when Elizabeth Parker, the Reverend's wife, broke ranks with her husband's opposition. During a church meeting, she stood up and shared her own story of growing up in foster care. "What these children need isn't our judgment," she declared, her voice trembling but firm. "They need our support," and understanding her courage inspired others to speak up. Jenkins, who had served the Matthews household for decades, transformed from formal butler to grandfatherly figure. He taught the girls to bake cookies using his grandmother's recipe, started a small vegetable garden with them, and somehow always knew when one of them needed hot chocolate and a sympathetic ear. Dr. Sarah Chen, Ava's new pulmonologist, went above and beyond medical care. She developed an asthma management plan that included all three sisters and John, ensuring everyone knew how to handle emergencies. Her detailed reports about the improvement in Ava's condition under John's care became crucial evidence in the custody hearings. The school librarian, M.S. Thompson, created a safe haven for the girls during lunch breaks. She designated a quiet corner where they could read, draw, or simply be themselves away from curious eyes. Other children, following her example, gradually began to include the sisters in their activities. Detective Lawson's support extended beyond professional duties. He taught Emma basic self-defense moves, showing her how to protect herself and her sisters without resorting to violence. His presence at school events and medical appointments added an extra layer of security that helped everyone relax. A support group for adoptive single parents reached out to John, offering guidance and understanding. Their experiences helped him navigate the challenges ahead, while their success stories gave him hope. Through them, he learned practical strategies for everything from handling public scrutiny to creating new family traditions. This growing network of allies proved essential when Mrs. Harker intensified her efforts to undermine them. Each attack was met with a wall of community support, each challenge faced not by a single family, but by an entire neighborhood united in protection of three little girls who had captured their hearts. The manila envelope arrived at John Matthews' office on a Tuesday morning. Inside, he found photographs of Sarah Pearson's final days at the hospital, medical records, and financial documents that painted a disturbing picture. William Anderson's betrayal revealed itself in layers, each more devastating than the last. But "I had no choice," John William explained, his voice steady despite the tension in John's study. "Mrs. Harker's organization extends beyond the orphanage. The money trail leads to people who can destroy us all." He placed another folder on the desk, this one containing evidence of decades of systematic child trafficking disguised as international adoptions. John's hands trembled as he examined the documents. Sarah Pearson had discovered the operation while trying to help another single mother navigate the system. Her sudden illness, her rapid decline, none of it had been natural. But the evidence suggested a carefully orchestrated elimination of a potential threat. "You knew," John's voice cut through the air like steel. "You knew what happened to their mother, and you've been helping them cover it up." William didn't deny it. Instead, he straightened his tie, a nervous habit from 30 years of friendship, and delivered the final blow. "They're coming for the girls tonight. Mrs. Harker has arranged for an emergency removal order, citing concerns about their safety." The judge who signed it, William, paused, shame finally coloring his voice. "I helped them find leverage against him." Detective Lawson, summoned by John's urgent message, arrived to find the study in disarray. Papers scattered across the floor, William nursing a bloody nose, and John already mobilizing their allies. "The girls are at school," John explained tersely. "But we have 4 hours before dismissal." The betrayal cut deeper than just William. Bank records revealed that several of John's most trusted business associates had been complicit in the cover-up. The foundation's board members, the family court evaluator, even their first social worker, all had been compromised or threatened into compliance. Sarah Pearson's final letter to her daughters, hidden among the documents, confirmed their worst fears. She had been gathering evidence, planning to expose the trafficking ring. Her last words warned of danger, not from illness but from people who would stop at nothing to keep their operation secret. Jenkins appeared at the study door, his usual composure shaken. "Sir, Miss Emma just called from school." Mrs. Harker was seen in the parking lot, the old butler's hands gripped a familiar teddy bear, Mr. Whiskers, left behind in the girls' rush to school that morning. John stared at the worn toy, remembering Olivia's words about it helping with bad dreams. Now they faced a nightmare all too real. William made one last attempt at justification. "John, you don't understand the reach these people have." "No, William," John cut him off, his voice hard with determination. "You don't understand what it means to protect family. Detective, we need to move fast. Jenkins, initiate protocol." Echo the butler nodded grimly and disappeared. As they rushed to save the girls, John clutched Mr. Whiskers, silently renewing his promise to Sarah Pearson. This time, the system wouldn't win. This time, the truth would come to light, no matter the cost. The hidden compartment in Sarah Pearson's old classroom desk yielded its secrets reluctantly. Miss Anderson's hands shook as she pulled out a weathered leather journal, its pages filled with Sarah's meticulous documentation. John and Detective Lawson huddled over the discovery, piecing together the final months of a dedicated mother's life. "She was investigating missing children," Detective Lawson muttered, scanning the careful notes. Dozens of cases spanning years, all connected to St. Mary's. Sarah had recorded dates, names, and suspicious patterns in adoptions. More disturbing were the photographs of children who had supposedly been placed with loving families abroad, but whose paper trails vanished into thin air. The journal revealed Sarah's growing horror as she uncovered the truth. Mrs. Harker's international adoption program was a front, carefully constructed to appear legitimate. The numbers don't match, Sarah had written. Children arrive, paperwork is filed, but they never reach their supposed destinations. Where are they going? A series of entries detailed Sarah's connection to Mrs. Harker, a relationship that stretched back to their college days. They had been teammates on the university swim team, close friends until a tragic accident during a competition. Sarah had tried to save another swimmer from drowning. Mrs. Harker had frozen in fear. The incident had created a rift that apparently never healed. "Victoria was always jealous," Sarah wrote, "of my swimming, my teaching, my girls, but I never imagined she could be involved in something this dark." The final entries grew increasingly urgent, describing threatening phone calls and mysterious cars following her home from school. The last entry, dated 3 days before her hospitalization, was particularly chilling. "If anything happens to me, the evidence is with Robert. The girls must never end up at St. Mary's. Victoria will never forgive me for that day at the pool. She'll try to destroy everything I love." Detective Lawson's face hardened. "Robert Chen, the chemistry teacher who disappeared last year." He pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the keys. "His accident never sat right with me. We need to reopen that investigation." John studied a photograph tucked into the journal's pages, Sarah and Victoria as young women, smiling by a pool. All this because of a decades-old grudge, he wondered aloud. Miss Anderson shook her head sadly. Not just that. Sarah had a way of seeing the best in people, of believing they could change. Victoria never forgave her for witnessing her moment of weakness. A sudden realization hit John. The girls' medical records, they all showed trace amounts of an unknown substance. Everyone assumed it was from their mother's medications, but Detective Lawson was already nodding. They were being poisoned slowly, just like their mother, making it look like genetic illness. The classroom door creaked, causing them all to jump, but it was only Jenkins, his face grave. "Sir, Mrs. Harker is at the courthouse. She's filing for immediate emergency custody, claiming new evidence of the girl's deteriorating health under your care." John clutched Sarah's journal, its pages heavy with truth. "We're running out of time," he said. "We need to find Robert Chen before they do." The courthouse steps became a battlefield at precisely 3:15 p.m. Mrs. Harker's legal team arrived with a fleet of social workers and police officers, brandishing the emergency custody order. John Matthews stood at the top of the stairs, Detective Lawson at his side, while Jenkins rushed the girls through the building's side entrance. Inside Judge Harrison's chambers, time seemed to compress. Emma gripped her sister's hands as Mrs. Harker made her dramatic entrance, her perfectly composed facade masking years of calculated malice. "These children," she announced, producing medical reports, "are showing signs of severe neglect under Mr. Matthews' care." John's temporary victory in gaining custody began to unravel as Mrs. Harker's medical experts testified about the girls' declining health. Blood tests showed concerning levels of stress hormones, weight loss, and in Ava's case, worsening asthma symptoms. The evidence seemed overwhelming, each document another nail in the coffin of John's guardianship. "Your Honor," Mrs. Harker's attorney pressed, "we request immediate removal of the children for their own safety." The words triggered chaos. Olivia began crying silently, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Ava's breathing grew labored, her small hand fumbling for her inhaler. Emma, ever the protector, stood up defiantly. "You killed our mother," Emma's accusation cut through the legal arguments like a thunderbolt. The courtroom fell silent as the 8-year-old faced her mother's murderer. "We saw the journal. We know what you did at the pool, and what you're doing at the orphanage." Mrs. Harker's composure cracked for just a moment, her eyes flickering with something dark and dangerous. "Poor confused child," she said smoothly. "Obviously Mr. Matthews has been feeding them disturbing stories." Detective Lawson chose that moment to step forward, Sarah's journal in one hand and a USB drive in the other. "Your Honor, we have evidence of extensive criminal activity centered at St. Mary's Orphanage, including..." His presentation was interrupted by sudden commotion outside the chambers. Robert Chen, the missing chemistry teacher, burst into the room, escorted by 2 FBI agents. His face bore the marks of months in hiding, but his voice was strong as he presented his own documentation of the trafficking operation. "I helped Sarah Pearson gather this evidence," he announced, "before they poisoned her." The next few minutes descended into controlled chaos. Mrs. Harker attempted to flee, but was blocked by Detective Lawson. Her lawyer, seeing the tide turn, began frantically distancing himself from his client. The social workers, many of whom had suspected something wrong for years, stepped away from Mrs. Harker's side of the room. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "This hearing is suspended pending criminal investigation. The children will remain in Mr. Matthews' custody under police protection." He turned to Mrs. Harker, his face stern. "And you, madam, are not going anywhere?" As Mrs. Harker was led away in handcuffs, John gathered the girls close. Emma's brave facade finally cracked as she buried her face in his suit jacket. Olivia and Ava pressed against him from either side, their small bodies trembling with relief and residual fear. "Let's go home," John whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "All of us, together." Despite Mrs. Harker's arrest, the legal battle intensified with unexpected ferocity. The state's Child Welfare Department, facing scrutiny over its oversight failures at St. Mary's, launched an aggressive review of John's guardianship. Their preliminary report, released on a cold Monday morning, sent shockwaves through the courthouse. "The department cannot endorse permanent placement with Mr. Matthews," the document stated clinically. "Recent events have demonstrated the ongoing risks to these minors when placed in high-profile situations." The report cited the media attention, the criminal investigation, and the girls' apparent stress symptoms as evidence supporting their recommendation for immediate removal. Deputy Director Margaret Wells, newly appointed after the scandal, defended the department's position before the Oversight Committee. While Mr. Matthews' intentions appear honorable, the children's exposure to criminal elements, media scrutiny, and legal proceedings has created an unsuitable environment for recovery from trauma. John's legal team, hastily restructured after William's betrayal, fought desperately against the bureaucratic tide. Their appeals highlighted the girls' improved school performance, regular medical care, and the strong support system developed within the community. However, each argument met with the same response: the department must prioritize stability and normalcy. The financial impact struck next. Several major donors withdrew from John's charitable foundation, Citing concerns about recent controversies, board members resigned in rapid succession, leaving the organization's future in doubt. Projects supporting hundreds of underprivileged children faced sudden funding shortfalls. Local media, sensing blood in the water, shifted their narrative. Matthew's empire crumbling headlined the business section, while social pages speculated about his obsession with the Pearson case. Former allies distanced themselves, declining interviews or offering carefully worded statements about regrettable situations. The greatest blow came when Judge Harrison, under pressure from his peers, recused himself from the case. His replacement, Judge Miranda Collins, was known for her conservative approach to non-traditional family structures. Her first action was to order a comprehensive psychological evaluation of both John and the girls. During the evaluation sessions, John watched helplessly as the girls retreated into themselves. Emma's protective instincts resurged, manifesting in hostile responses to the evaluator's questions. Olivia's nightmares returned with devastating intensity, while Ava's asthma required 2 emergency room visits in 1 week. Detective Lawson, now leading the trafficking investigation, provided a stark warning. "They're using the system against you, John. The same people who protected Mrs. Harker for years are still in power. They're trying to bury this case by discrediting you." The crisis peaked when social services arrived for a surprise inspection and found John conducting a late-night Foundation emergency meeting in his study. The subsequent report criticized his prioritization of business interests over childcare responsibilities, despite the girls being safely asleep upstairs under Jenkins' watchful care. Perhaps the social worker suggested with artificial sympathy, "It's time to consider what's truly best for these children." The implication hung in the air, like a guillotine blade. John's fight for his family might be causing more harm than good. The diagnosis arrived with clinical detachment in Dr. Howard's private office. Stage 2 pancreatic cancer, he informed John quietly, sliding the scan results across his desk. "We caught it relatively early, but treatment needs to begin immediately." John stared at the images, his mind racing not to his own mortality, but to 3 little girls who had already lost one parent to cancer. At home, maintaining normalcy became an exhausting performance. John scheduled chemotherapy sessions during school hours, explaining his increasing fatigue as work stress. Emma, however, noticed the changes: the untouched dinners, the lingering nausea, the way he held the stair railings a bit tighter each day. She began watching him with the same protective intensity she showed her sisters. Olivia's depression manifested in silent withdrawals. The school counselor reported finding her hiding in the library during lunch periods, clutching Mr. Whiskers and rocking quietly. Her artwork, once filled with bright colors and family scenes, turned dark and chaotic. When asked about the changes, she would only whisper, "Everyone leaves eventually." Ava's health deteriorated in tandem with John's. Her asthma attacks increased, seemingly triggered by emotional stress rather than physical exertion. During one particularly severe episode, she confessed between gasps, "I can smell the hospital on you, like Mummy." The words haunted John through sleepless nights of planning and worry. Jenkins, aware of his employer's condition, shouldered additional responsibilities without comment. He began documenting daily routines, emergency contacts, and the girls' preferences in a leather-bound notebook. When John discovered it, the butler simply said, "For continuity of care, sir," should it become necessary. Detective Lawson confronted John after a particularly rough chemotherapy session. "You can't keep this from them," he argued. "They've already lost one parent to secrets and lies," but John remained adamant. "The custody hearing is in 3 weeks. If the court knows about my condition, we'll lose everything." The girls' separation anxiety intensified, though they didn't understand its source. They began insisting on sleeping in the same room, 3 beds pushed together like their days in the apartment above Henderson's bookstore. At night, John would find them holding hands in their sleep, as if anchoring each other against an approaching storm. Dr. Howard pressed for more aggressive treatment, but John refused anything that would compromise his ability to care for the girls. "What good is surviving if I lose them in the process?" he demanded. The oncologist's response was gentle but firm. "What good is winning custody if they lose you shortly after?" One evening, as John sat in his study reviewing legal documents through increasingly blurry vision, Emma appeared in the doorway. Without a word, she climbed onto his lap, her small hand reaching up to touch the dark circles under his eyes. "You promised no more secrets," she whispered. "Like Mummy promised." The weight of that truth, combined with his physical pain, nearly broke him. He gathered her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, wondering how to protect her from another loss while being honest about the battles ahead, both legal and medical. The threats began arriving in elegant envelopes, each bearing the watermark of Mrs. Harker's expensive stationery. Despite her incarceration, her network continued to operate with frightening efficiency. The messages were subtle but clear: photographs of the girls at school, detailed accounts of their daily routines, and occasional references to Sarah Pearson's unfortunate accident. Detective Lawson intercepted most of these communications, but even he couldn't prevent the systematic dismantling of John's business empire. Major contracts mysteriously fell through, regulatory investigations appeared out of nowhere, and longtime business partners suddenly became unreachable. The Matthews Foundation, already struggling, faced an audit that threatened its very existence. Judge Collins received her own kind of pressure. Anonymous tips questioned her impartiality, suggesting connections between her family and the Matthews business interests. Despite no evidence of impropriety, she faced increasing scrutiny from the Judicial Review Board. Each court session became a careful dance of demonstrating objectivity while navigating complex legal and ethical considerations. The media siege intensified. Rebecca Sterling, still pursuing her story, uncovered John's medical records through a source at the hospital. Her article, while not directly mentioning his cancer diagnosis, raised questions about his fitness for guardianship and undisclosed health issues. The story sparked a fresh wave of court-mandated evaluations and home inspections. At Riverside Elementary, the pressure took a more personal form. Parents began withdrawing their children from classes shared with the Pearson triplets, citing concerns about safety and negative influences. The principal, though sympathetic, warned John about declining enrollment numbers and potential budget implications. Mrs. Harker's remaining allies in the child welfare system launched a coordinated campaign of paperwork and procedures. Every week brought new forms, assessments, and requirements. Each document demanded immediate attention, creating a bureaucratic maze designed to overwhelm and exhaust. Detective Lawson's superiors questioned his dedication to other cases, suggesting that his involvement with the Matthews situation had become inappropriately personal. The implied threat to his career was clear, yet he refused to step back, understanding that his badge might be the only thing keeping darker forces at bay. The pressure reached Jenkins through more subtle channels. His elderly sister's nursing home suddenly reviewed its financial arrangements. His nephew's college scholarship faced unexpected administrative review. Each attack demonstrated the extensive reach of Mrs. Harker's organization and their willingness to target even peripheral supporters. The community support began to waver under the relentless assault. The local bakery that had once welcomed the girls now served them with careful neutrality. The neighborhood watch groups that had protected them from photographers gradually disbanded. Even their strongest advocates began to question whether the fight was causing more harm than good. One morning, John found Emma sitting on the mansion steps, watching the sunrise with unusual solemnity. "They're trying to make you give up," she said, her young voice carrying the weight of understanding far beyond her years. "Like they made Mummy give up." John sat beside her, his body aching from recent treatments but his resolve unshaken. "The difference," he replied softly, "is that your mother fought alone. We fight together." The kidnapping attempt occurred with surgical precision at 3:15 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. Two black SUVs intercepted the school bus, forcing it to stop on a quiet suburban street. Men in dark suits, presenting falsified court orders, demanded the Pearson triplets be released into their custody. The bus driver, following recent security protocols, immediately triggered the silent alarm John had installed. John received the alert during his chemotherapy session. Ignoring Dr. Howard's protests, he ripped out the IV and rushed from the hospital, his body moving on pure adrenaline. Detective Lawson, already en route, coordinated with patrol units while maintaining phone contact with the bus driver. Emma, recognizing the danger from countless safety drills, implemented their emergency plan. She guided Olivia and Ava to the back of the bus, where they huddled together behind the older students who formed a protective barrier. The other children, many of whom had initially shunned the sisters, now stood united in their defense. The confrontation escalated when one of the men attempted to board the bus. The driver, Mr. Thompson, blocked the entrance with his considerable frame. "These children are under my protection," he declared firmly, despite the visible trembling of his hands. "You'll need more than papers to take them." John arrived simultaneously with 3 police cruisers, his car skidding to a stop mere feet from the SUVs. His appearance shocked even Detective Lawson Pale, with medical tape still attached to his arm, but radiating a fierce determination that transcended his physical weakness. "This ends now," John announced, his voice carrying despite its weakness. He held up his phone, displaying a live video feed. "Every moment of this attempted abduction is being broadcast to the FBI's trafficking task force. Your employers can't protect you anymore." The would-be kidnappers hesitated, their professional facade cracking as police officers surrounded them. But the real threat emerged from the second SUV, William Anderson, John's former attorney, holding a manila envelope. "Don't push this, John," he warned. "I have evidence of your medical condition. One phone call to Judge Collins." Emma's voice cut through the tension. She had moved to the bus window, Olivia and Ava beside her. "You're just like Mrs. Harker," she called out, her young voice steady. "You think being scary means being strong. But real strength is what Daddy shows every day, even when he's sick and tired. He never gives up on us." The word Daddy, spoken for the first time, hit John like a physical force. William faltered, the envelope dropping from his suddenly loose grip. Detective Lawson moved swiftly, securing both the evidence and the conspirators. As the situation diffused, John boarded the bus on shaking legs. The triplets ran to him, their small arms wrapping around him with desperate strength. Other children cheered, while Mr. Thompson discreetly wiped his eyes. Through the bus window, John could see news vans arriving, their cameras capturing the scene. "Let them film," Emma whispered fiercely. "Let everyone see what real family looks like." In the aftermath of the kidnapping attempt, Robert Chen's evidence files revealed the full scope of Mrs. Harker's operation. The chemistry teacher had meticulously documented years of suspicious activities at St. Mary's Orphanage, including detailed chemical analyses of substances found in the facility's medical supplies. His findings painted a chilling picture of systematic poisoning designed to mimic natural illnesses. Sarah Pearson's role in uncovering the truth emerged through a series of encrypted emails between her and Chen. As a teacher at Lincoln Elementary, she had noticed patterns among former St. Mary's children in her classes, recurring health issues, mysterious absences, and sudden international adoptions that left no trace. Her investigation began as simple concern for her students, but unveiled a network of corruption reaching into the highest levels of the child welfare system. Detective Lawson presented the evidence during an emergency hearing before Judge Collins. The detailed financial records showed millions of dollars flowing through shell companies, with transactions coinciding with each disappeared child. More disturbing were the medical records, revealing how Mrs. Harker had perfected a method of inducing symptoms that mimicked genetic conditions, a technique first tested on Sarah Pearson. "She chose their mother deliberately," Lawson explained to the court. Mrs. Harker had been monitoring Sarah's investigation for months. The poison was administered gradually through contaminated water bottles in her classroom. By the time symptoms appeared, it looked like natural cancer progression. William Anderson's confession provided the final pieces. He admitted to helping conceal financial records and manipulating court documents, but his testimony revealed something unexpected. Mrs. Harker's personal vendetta against Sarah stemmed from more than the old swimming accident. Sarah had discovered that Victoria Harker's own child, presumed drowned in that college incident, had actually been her first victim. The courtroom fell silent as Anderson described Mrs. Harker's descent into madness. The drowning of her child had been no accident, but rather a calculated move to conceal the baby's severe health issues caused by her early experiments with the same poisons later used on Sarah. The guilt and trauma twisted into a perverse mission to save other children from what she perceived as unworthy parents. John sat with the girls as the truth about their mother's death was revealed. Emma maintained her protective stance, one arm around each sister, but tears streamed down her face. Olivia clutched Mr. Whiskers, her mother's last gift, while Ava's wheezing breaths reflected her emotional struggle. Yet there was strength in their unity, a resilience that even Mrs. Harker's poison couldn't break. Judge Collins ordered a complete review of every adoption process through St. Mary's during Mrs. Harker's tenure. International law enforcement agencies began tracking down missing children, while task forces investigated similar operations at other facilities. The system that had failed so many children faced a long overdue reckoning. Sarah Pearson's final message to her daughters, found in Robert Chen's files, took on new meaning. Stay together, my brave girls. The truth has a way of coming to light, carried by love stronger than hatred. The collapse occurred during John's testimony at the final custody hearing. Mid-sentence, describing his plans for the girl's future, he faltered. Detective Lawson caught him before he hit the courtroom floor. The cancer, accelerated by stress and neglected treatments, had finally demanded its toll. In the hospital's intensive care unit, machines marked time with steady beeps while Dr. Howard delivered his assessment to Detective Lawson. The cancer has spread aggressively. Without immediate intensive treatment, he has weeks, maybe days. Down the hall, the Pearson triplets huddled together on a waiting room chair designed for adults, their small forms creating a single silhouette of shared grief. Child Protective Services moved swiftly. Within hours of John's hospitalization, emergency placement orders appeared. The children need stability during this crisis, the document stated clinically. Despite protests from Detective Lawson and the community, 3 separate foster homes were designated, each in different districts. Emma, faced with imminent separation, implemented their last resort plan. As the social workers approached with their court orders, the sisters vanished into the hospital's maze of corridors. They had memorized the layout during Ava's asthma treatments, knowing this day might come. Their disappearance triggered a hospital-wide search. Jenkins discovered them in John's ICU room, having slipped past security during shift change. They had pushed a chair against the door and now stood guard over their unconscious guardian. Emma clutched John's hand, while Olivia pressed Mr. Whiskers into his unresponsive fingers. Ava, fighting for breath through her anxiety, refused her inhaler until the social workers retreated. "He promised we'd stay together," Emma declared through the door, her voice steadier than her trembling shoulders. "We're not leaving him alone like Mummy was alone." The standoff continued as hospital staff, social workers and police gathered in the hallway, none willing to forcibly remove 3 traumatized children from their dying father's bedside. Detective Lawson arrived to find Judge Collins already present, observing the scene with troubled eyes. "The law is clear," she began, but stopped as Olivia's muffled sobs penetrated the door. The judge's professional demeanor cracked, revealing the mother beneath the robes. Sometimes, she admitted quietly, the law fails to account for the human heart. Inside the room, the girls maintained their vigil. They took turns talking to John, reminding him of promises made and adventures planned. Emma read from his case notes, her young voice stumbling over legal terms. Olivia sang their mother's favorite lullaby. Ava drew pictures of their family and taped them to his monitoring equipment. As night fell, the hospital made an unprecedented exception to visiting hours. Detective Lawson and Jenkins took shifts outside the door, while Judge Collins quietly suspended the placement orders. The community rallied, sending food, blankets, and messages of support. Parents whose children attended school with the triplets organized a prayer vigil in the parking lot. In the darkened ICU room, 3 little girls slept curled around their father's still form, their hands linked across his chest. The machines continued their rhythmic beeping, counting down to either miracle or heartbreak. The revelation arrived in Dr. Howard's office at 3 in the morning, delivered by an exhausted laboratory technician who had been reviewing Sarah Pearson's original tissue samples. The new analysis, using advanced screening protocols, detected trace elements that exactly matched the chemical signature of John's pancreatic cancer markers. The implications were staggering. Robert Chen's research notes provided the crucial connection. Mrs. Harker had used the same synthetic compound on both Sarah Pearson and John Matthews, but with one critical difference. While Sarah received a concentrated dose designed to mimic aggressive cancer, John's exposure came through years of handling documentation from St. Mary's Orphanage papers deliberately treated with a slow-acting variant of the toxin. Detective Lawson mobilized a hazmat team to secure John's office and the Foundation's archives. The team discovered elevated toxin levels in specific documents, all relating to St. Mary's financial audits. Mrs. Harker had weaponized John's dedication to helping children, knowing his thorough review of every document would ensure sustained exposure. The treatment protocol shifted dramatically with this knowledge. Dr. Howard, consulting with toxicologists, developed an aggressive detoxification plan. "This isn't just cancer we're fighting," he explained to the medical team. "It's targeted poisoning designed to appear as cancer. We can counter it if we act quickly." In the ICU, the girls refused to leave even as hazmat teams swept the room for contaminated materials. Emma, showing wisdom beyond her years, helped the investigators identify every document John had reviewed regarding their case. Her perfect memory of their time together proved invaluable in tracking the exposure timeline. Judge Collins convened an emergency session in the hospital conference room. The evidence presented painted a picture of calculated malice spanning decades. Mrs. Harker had not only murdered Sarah Pearson and attempted to kill John Matthews, but had potentially poisoned countless others who investigated her operation too closely. The FBI's forensic team discovered a hidden room in St. Mary's administrative wing filled with carefully labeled compounds and detailed records of their effects. Mrs. Harker had transformed her childhood trauma into a terrifying expertise in untraceable poisoning, using the orphanage as both cover and laboratory. Within hours of implementing the new treatment protocol, John's vital signs began to stabilize. The decline that had seemed irreversible slowed, then gradually reversed. Dr. Howard cautioned against premature optimism, but couldn't hide his own relief, as each new test showed decreasing toxin levels. The girls maintained their vigil, but now with renewed hope. They took turns helping the nurses change IV bags, learning the names of each medication, insisting on being part of their father's recovery team. The staff, moved by their dedication, began including them in daily rounds, explaining each improvement in terms they could understand. Detective Lawson secured a full confession from Mrs. Harker, who seemed almost relieved to finally reveal the scope of her crimes. Her detailed testimony ensured that no one involved in her network could escape justice. More importantly, it provided crucial information about every child who had passed through St. Mary's during her tenure, offering hope to countless families seeking answers about their missing loved ones. The final custody hearing took place in John's hospital room, transformed into an impromptu courtroom by Judge Collins' order. John, now strong enough to sit upright, held the girls' hands as his legal team presented their concluding arguments. The evidence of Mrs. Harker's systematic persecution of their family had transformed the proceedings from a question of custody to a recognition of justice. Judge Collins began her ruling with unprecedented candor. "This court has witnessed an extraordinary convergence of tragedy and triumph," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of history. "The attempted destruction of two families, first Sarah Pearson's, then John Matthews, through calculated malice, has instead revealed the unshakable bonds that define true family." The formal order granting permanent custody to John Matthews cited not only his demonstrated commitment to the children's welfare, but also the profound resilience shown by all parties. The judge specifically noted how the crisis had united the community, creating a support network that would ensure the family's continued success. Child Protective Services, under new leadership following the scandal, issued a formal apology for their role in prolonging the children's trauma. The agency announced comprehensive reforms, including mandatory investigation of all abuse allegations and new protocols for keeping sibling groups together. The Pearson case would become required study material for all new social workers. Legal recognition of the family's bonds came with additional protections. Judge Collins granted an unprecedented order preventing any future attempts to separate the children without direct judicial review. The ruling established new precedent for non-traditional families, emphasizing the importance of emotional bonds over conventional family structures. But the hospital room erupted in celebration as Judge Collins signed the final documents. Emma, maintaining her role as family spokesperson, delivered a speech that left not a dry eye in the room. "Today, love won," she declared, standing tall beside John's bed. "Our mom always said truth comes to light. She sent us our new dad to make sure we'd be safe until it did." Olivia, usually shy, presented Judge Collins with a carefully drawn picture of their family, John, the three girls, and a smiling figure she identified as their mother watching over them. The judge, visibly moved, requested permission to hang the artwork in her chambers as a reminder of justice's human impact. Ava's contribution came in the form of a song she had composed during their hospital vigil, her clear voice carrying lyrics about family being chosen by heart rather than circumstance. The medical staff, who had become part of their extended family during John's recovery, joined in the chorus. Detective Lawson, standing guard at the door one final time, witnessed the moment when formality fell away and pure joy took over. John gathered his daughters officially, legally and irrevocably his daughters into a careful embrace, mindful of his healing body, but unable to contain his happiness. "The paperwork says what we already knew," Emma declared firmly, her sisters nodding in agreement. "We're the Matthews family now, and forever." John's eyes met Judge Collins over their heads, sharing a moment of profound understanding about the real meaning of justice and family. The genetic test results arrived during John's final week of detoxification therapy. Dr. Howard presented the findings with barely contained excitement. A rare genetic marker shared between John Matthews and Sarah Pearson indicated a distant but definite family connection. Further investigation revealed that their great-grandparents had been siblings, separated during the Great Depression and raised in different orphanages. The discovery transformed their family narrative. Emma spent hours poring over old photographs, identifying shared features between John and their mother: the same determined set of the jaw, the identical way their eyes crinkled when they smiled. Olivia found comfort in knowing their connection to John had been written in their DNA all along, while Ava created an elaborate family tree, decorating it with portraits she drew herself. Jenkins, assisted by Detective Lawson, uncovered more connections through genealogical research. Sarah Pearson had unknowingly applied for a teaching grant from the Matthews Foundation the year before her death. John had personally approved the funding, drawn to her passionate essay about ensuring no child felt unloved or unwanted. Their paths had been converging long before fate brought them together. The hospital staff noticed profound changes in the family's dynamics as this knowledge settled. The girls' protective instincts toward John evolved from desperate guardianship to confident caring. They participated in his physical therapy sessions with cheerful determination, turning exercises into games and celebrating each small victory in his recovery. John's perspective on his own childhood shifted dramatically. Understanding his biological connection to Sarah helped him process his own abandonment trauma. He began sharing stories about his time in the orphanage with the girls, transforming painful memories into lessons about resilience and hope. These evening conversations became treasured family moments, healing old wounds while strengthening new bonds. Medical tests confirmed that the girls had inherited their mother's genetic resilience, which had allowed Sarah to fight the poison longer than Mrs. Harker had anticipated. This same strength manifested in John's unexpectedly robust recovery. Dr. Howard noted that the family's constant presence seemed to accelerate the healing process, as if their shared DNA created a uniquely supportive environment. The family's legal status gained an additional layer of legitimacy with the genetic confirmation, though Judge Collins noted it was merely supporting evidence for a bond that had already proven unshakable. She amended the adoption records to reflect both the legal and biological connections, ensuring their family history would be properly documented for future generations. Emma summarized their journey during John's discharge celebration, speaking with the poise that had become her trademark. "Some people find their family through birth," she declared, holding her sister's hands. "Others find their family through love. We got lucky we found ours through both." Their departure from the hospital marked more than medical recovery. As John walked out under his own power, a daughter on each side and Emma leading the way, they emerged not just as survivors of a shared trauma, but as a family proven by science, strengthened by adversity, and bonded by something deeper than either law or genetics could define. The transformation of St. Mary's Orphanage began with its renaming to the Sarah Pearson Children's Center. Under John Matthews' supervision, the imposing Victorian building underwent extensive renovation, its dark corridors replaced with light-filled spaces designed to foster healing and hope. The chemical-stained administrative wing was demolished, replaced by a modern medical facility specializing in treating children recovering from abuse and neglect. Detective Lawson's investigation led to comprehensive reforms across the child welfare system. The state legislature passed the Pearson-Matthews Child Protection Act, establishing stringent oversight requirements for all childcare facilities. The law mandated regular independent audits, surprise inspections, and direct reporting channels for staff and children to report concerns without fear of retaliation. The Matthews Foundation, now co-directed by John and Emma despite her young age, implemented innovative programs that became national models. Their siblings' first initiative required child welfare agencies to demonstrate extraordinary circumstances before separating brothers and sisters. The foundation provided housing subsidies and support services to help foster families accommodate sibling groups. But Judge Collins spearheaded judicial reforms, creating specialized family court divisions staffed by judges trained in trauma-informed decision-making. She regularly invited the Matthews family to speak at judicial conferences, where Emma's articulate descriptions of their experiences moved hardened legal professionals to tears and, more importantly, to action. The new protocols for vetting potential guardians, dubbed the Matthews Standard, emphasized emotional bonds and community support networks over traditional family structures. Social workers received extensive training in recognizing and nurturing authentic connections between children and their caregivers, whether biological or chosen. International adoption procedures underwent rigorous review and restructuring. Every child's case history from Mrs. Harker's tenure was re-examined, leading to joyful reunions and healing of families torn apart by her trafficking operation. The Matthews Foundation established a dedicated unit to support these reunited families, providing counseling, educational support, and financial assistance. Local schools adopted programs designed by child psychologists who had worked with the Pearson Triplets. These initiatives focused on creating inclusive environments where children from non-traditional families felt supported and validated. Olivia, drawing from her own experiences, helped develop peer support groups for students dealing with trauma and loss. The medical protocols developed during John's treatment led to the creation of a specialized toxicology unit at City General Hospital. Dr. Howard headed the new department, which focused on detecting and treating subtle poisonings that mimic natural illnesses. Their research saved countless lives and exposed several other institutional abuse cases across the country. Perhaps most significantly, the child welfare system's approach to trauma changed fundamentally. The Pearson Triplets story demonstrated how maintaining sibling bonds could provide crucial emotional support during recovery. Foster parent training now emphasized preserving children's existing emotional connections while building new ones. John, fully recovered and actively involved in these reforms, often reflected on how personal tragedy had sparked systemic change. During the dedication ceremony for the new Children's Center, he expressed this sentiment: simply Sarah Pearson's love for her daughters exposed darkness and created light. Our responsibility now is to ensure that light continues to shine for every child who needs it. The year following John's recovery marked profound transformations for each member of the Matthews family. Emma's leadership abilities flourished as she took on an advisory role at the foundation, her natural protective instincts evolving into sophisticated advocacy skills. During board meetings, seasoned executives found themselves taking notes as she articulated the needs of vulnerable children with remarkable clarity and insight. Olivia emerged from her shell of anxiety through art therapy, discovering a talent for helping other traumatized children express their emotions through painting. Her weekly art classes at the Sarah Pearson Children's Center became a sanctuary for young residents struggling to process their experiences. Mr. Whiskers, still her constant companion, now served as a mascot and comfort object for newcomers to the program. Ava's health stabilized as she gained confidence in her new family's permanence. Her asthma attacks decreased significantly, and her medical team attributed the improvement to reduced anxiety and consistent care. She channeled her experiences into music, composing songs that captured both the pain of loss and the joy of finding a new family. Her performances at center events often moved audiences to tears and action. But John's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. His recovery from the poisoning left him with a deeper appreciation for life's fragility and beauty. The businessman, who once viewed philanthropy as a responsibility, now approached it as a calling. His relationship with each daughter deepened, uniquely strategic planning sessions with Emma, quiet painting afternoons with Olivia, and piano lessons with Ava. Detective Lawson, inspired by the family's journey, established a specialized unit focusing on family reunification cases. He often consulted with Emma, whose insight into the sibling perspective proved invaluable in sensitive operations. Their collaboration led to several successful reunifications of families separated by trafficking operations. Judge Collins found herself permanently changed by her involvement with the Matthews case. Her courtroom became known for its emphasis on emotional well-being alongside legal considerations. She maintained a special relationship with the family, attending their milestone celebrations and seeking their input on challenging cases involving sibling groups. The Matthews mansion transformed from a symbol of solitary wealth into a vibrant family home. Jenkins, who had once maintained its pristine order, now cheerfully managed art supplies in the study and musical instruments in the living room. The formal dining room hosted homework sessions and family game nights, while the garden bloomed with 3 distinct flower beds, each tended by one of the girls. The community perceptions shifted dramatically. Those who had once whispered suspicions about John's motives now sought his advice on adoption and fostering. The triplets' former classmates, understanding the true story of their family's formation, became vocal advocates against bullying and discrimination. Most significantly, the family developed new traditions that honored both their past and present. Sarah's birthday became an annual celebration of motherhood and sacrifice, where they shared memories and released lanterns into the evening sky. They maintained a memorial garden where 3 rose bushes, planted by the girls, bloomed alongside a sturdy oak tree representing their new father. The Matthews Foundation underwent a complete restructuring to reflect its expanded mission of protecting and supporting vulnerable families. The organization's new headquarters occupied the renovated St. Mary's building, its modern facilities housing specialized programs developed through the family's personal experiences. The board of directors now included child welfare experts, former foster children, and advocates for family preservation. Under John and Emma's joint leadership, the foundation launched several groundbreaking initiatives. The Sarah Pearson Scholarship Fund provided educational support to children who had survived institutional abuse, covering not only tuition but also therapeutic services and family counseling. The program's holistic approach recognized that academic success required emotional healing and family stability. The Foundation's innovative Family Bonds program revolutionized the foster care system's approach to sibling groups. Drawing from the triplets' experiences, the program provided specialized training for foster parents willing to keep siblings together. Support services included housing assistance, medical care coordination, and ongoing mentorship from families who had successfully navigated similar challenges. Olivia's art therapy program expanded into a comprehensive healing arts center. Professional therapists worked alongside child artists to create an environment where trauma survivors could safely express their experiences. The center's walls displayed powerful artwork that educated visitors about the importance of family preservation and child protection. Ava's musical advocacy led to the creation of Voices United, a foundation-sponsored choir combining current and former foster children. Their performances at legislative hearings and child welfare conferences brought powerful emotional context policy discussions. The program expanded to include music therapy services at children's centers across the state. The foundation established a legal advocacy division specializing in complex custody cases involving sibling groups. Inspired by their own legal battle, the Matthews family ensured that no child would face separation from siblings solely due to systemic constraints or financial limitations. The division's work led to numerous precedent-setting cases strengthening siblings' rights. Research became a cornerstone of the foundation's work. The Sarah Pearson Center for Family Studies conducted groundbreaking research on sibling relationships in the foster care system, trauma-informed caregiving, and best practices for family reunification. Their findings influenced policy decisions at state and national levels. International outreach programs extended the foundation's impact globally. Drawing on lessons learned from exposing Mrs. Harker's trafficking network, they developed protocols for identifying and preventing institutional abuse in childcare facilities worldwide. Partner organizations implemented these safeguards across continents, protecting countless vulnerable children. The Foundation's annual Family First Conference became the premier gathering for child welfare professionals, featuring presentations from experts alongside testimonials from families who had overcome separation and trauma. The event always opened with the Matthews family sharing updates on their journey, demonstrating the long-term success possible when systems prioritize keeping families together. John often reflected that the Foundation's greatest achievement was its role in changing public perception of family. Through their programs and advocacy, they demonstrated that family bonds transcend traditional definitions, that healing happens in community, and that every child deserves champions who will fight to protect their relationships with siblings and loved ones. The first anniversary of John Matthews' recovery and the family's legal unification dawned bright and clear. The mansion's grounds, once manicured to sterile perfection, now displayed the joyful signs of childhood: a treehouse built to Emma's exact specifications, Olivia's butterfly garden, and the mini amphitheater where Ava practiced her performances. Inside, the transformation was even more profound. John sat at the breakfast table, watching his daughters prepare for their respective responsibilities. Emma, now 9, reviewed foundation documents with the seriousness of a seasoned executive, making notes in her color-coded planner. Her recent presentation to the state legislature on sibling rights had earned standing ovations and promises of increased funding. Olivia arranged her art supplies for the day's therapy session at the center, carefully selecting colors known to help children express difficult emotions. Her own artwork, displayed prominently throughout the mansion, chronicled their family's journey from trauma to triumph. Mr. Whiskers, though still her constant companion, now wore a small name badge identifying him as the official therapy program mascot. Ava's morning vocal exercises filled the kitchen with melody as she practiced for the upcoming benefit concert. Her asthma, now well managed through a combination of medical care and emotional security, rarely interfered with her performances. The previous week's newspaper had featured her choir of foster children on the front page, celebrating their role in raising awareness for family preservation. Jenkins moved through the morning routine with practiced ease, having adapted his butler's precision to the organized chaos of family life. He maintained a careful log of each child's achievements, appointments, and milestones, creating an archive of their growth that already filled several leather-bound volumes. Detective Lawson arrived for his weekly breakfast visit, bringing updates on the ongoing impact of their case. The Pearson-Matthews protocols had been adopted by child services departments in 12 states, with more preparing to follow. His specialized family reunification unit had successfully resolved 30 cases in the past year alone. Judge Collins, stopping by to discuss the Foundation's latest initiative, marveled at the changes. The 3 frightened girls who had once huddled in her courtroom had blossomed into confident young advocates for child welfare reform. Their influence extended far beyond their years, shaped by experiences that had transformed personal tragedy into public good. Dr. Howard's latest checkup had confirmed John's complete recovery, attributing his remarkable healing to both medical intervention and the constant support of his daughters. The medical protocols developed during his treatment had saved dozens of lives, identifying similar poisoning cases in other institutional settings. The morning's interactions highlighted how thoroughly their individual healing had strengthened their collective bonds. Each family member had found their unique way to contribute to their shared mission of protecting vulnerable children and families. Their personal story had become a powerful catalyst for systemic change, demonstrating how love could transform not only individual lives but entire institutions. Mrs. Victoria Harker's sentencing hearing brought final closure to decades of systematic abuse. The courthouse, once a battleground for the Matthews family, now witnessed her accountability for crimes that had devastated countless families. Judge Collins presided over the proceedings with measured gravity, acknowledging both the scope of harm and the importance of justice being visibly served. The prosecution presented evidence from 37 confirmed cases of child trafficking, 15 deaths attributed to deliberate poisoning, and hundreds of instances of institutional abuse. Detective Lawson's testimony detailed how the investigation had uncovered similar operations in 5 other states, all connected to Mrs. Harker's network. Each revelation strengthened the case for maximum sentencing. William Anderson, having accepted a plea agreement in exchange for his cooperation, provided crucial testimony about the financial infrastructure that had supported Mrs. Harker's crimes. His detailed accounts led to the recovery of millions in hidden assets, which were redirected to a victim compensation fund managed by the Matthews Foundation. Emma, speaking on behalf of all affected children, delivered an impact statement that left an indelible mark on everyone present. Her clear voice never wavered as she described not only their personal losses, but also their journey to healing and purpose. She concluded by offering forgiveness, not for Mrs. Harker's benefit, but as a declaration of their own freedom from the weight of hatred. The court's sentence reflected the magnitude of Mrs. Harker's crimes: multiple life terms without possibility of parole, along with substantial financial penalties. More significantly, the verdict established legal precedents for prosecuting institutional abuse and trafficking cases, ensuring future perpetrators would face similarly severe consequences. The investigation's ripple effects continued to expand. Reform legislation passed in multiple states, implementing stringent oversight of childcare institutions. International adoption procedures underwent comprehensive revision, with new safeguards specifically designed to prevent trafficking under the guise of charitable work. Robert Chen, fully recovered and reinstated to his teaching position, established a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in child advocacy and protection. His classroom became a model for teaching children about personal safety and the importance of speaking up against abuse. The Sarah Pearson Children's Center, rising from the ashes of St. Mary's dark legacy, stood as a living monument to transformation and healing. Its programs focused on trauma recovery and family reunification represented everything Mrs. Harker had tried to destroy hope, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Law enforcement agencies nationwide adopted the investigative protocols developed during the case. Detective Lawson's specialized unit became a training center for officers working on family reunification and institutional abuse cases, ensuring that the lessons learned would protect future generations. Judge Collins, in her final remarks at the sentencing, emphasized how justice had emerged from the courage of children and the dedication of those who believed them. The Matthews family's victory, she noted, had created a template for addressing systemic abuse while preserving the dignity and humanity of survivors. On the eve of the girl's 10th birthday, John Matthews finalized arrangements that would secure his daughter's future while honoring their mother's legacy. The announcement came during the annual Foundation Gala, where the family's journey from tragedy to triumph had become a symbol of hope for child welfare reform nationwide. 3 separate trust funds, carefully structured to support each girl's unique path, reflected their individual dreams while maintaining their unbreakable connection. Emma's fund included provisions for law school and public policy studies, acknowledging her emerging role as an advocate for systemic change. Olivia's trust incorporated support for art therapy education and the establishment of healing arts programs. Ava's financial future included resources for musical education and the expansion of therapeutic music initiatives. The Matthews Family Scholarship Program launched that evening, offering comprehensive support to siblings in the foster care system. Beyond traditional educational expenses, the program provided housing assistance to keep families together, mental health services, and mentorship opportunities. The first recipients, 3 brothers from the former St. Mary's Orphanage, represented the program's commitment to transforming lives through education and family preservation. John's vision for the Foundation's future emphasized sustainable change through education and advocacy. New partnerships with leading universities established research centers dedicated to family preservation and trauma recovery. The Sarah Pearson Institute for Child Welfare Studies would train the next generation of social workers, lawyers, and healthcare providers in trauma-informed practices. Community outreach expanded through innovative programs designed by the girls themselves. Emma's Sibling Advocates initiative trained young people to speak up for family preservation in policy discussions. Olivia's Art of Healing workshops brought creative therapy to underserved communities. Ava's musical outreach program provided instruments and lessons to children in foster care. The mansion's grounds underwent another transformation, this time into an educational campus where families could learn, heal, and grow together. Gardens designed by Olivia offered peaceful spaces for reflection and therapy. Ava's Music Pavilion hosted concerts and workshops, while Emma's Advocacy Center provided resources for families navigating the child welfare system. Sarah Pearson's presence remained strong in their lives, honored through annual ceremonies and daily remembrances. Her classroom at Lincoln Elementary became a museum of sorts, displaying photographs and articles chronicling both her dedication to teaching and the systemic changes her death had ultimately inspired. Detective Lawson's retirement announcement came with the establishment of a law enforcement training program in his name, ensuring that future generations of officers would understand the crucial role of family preservation in child protection. Judge Collins continued to mentor young lawyers interested in family law, sharing lessons learned from the Matthews case. As the gala concluded, John gathered his daughters for a quiet moment away from the celebrations. Emma, Olivia, and Ava, now confident young leaders in their own right, had transformed their trauma into purpose, their loss into legacy. Together, they had built something their mother would have been proud of, a family that extended far beyond blood ties, offering hope and help to others facing similar challenges. Remember, John told them, echoing Sarah's last words, "We're stronger together. And now we're strong enough to help others find their strength too." Your thoughts and reactions to this story are invaluable to us. What resonated most with you? Was it John's unwavering dedication, the sisters' unbreakable bond, or perhaps the community's transformative support? Share your perspective and personal reflections in the comments below. What would you have done in John's position when faced with such challenging decisions? We are dedicated to bringing you meaningful stories that illuminate the human spirit and inspire positive change. To ensure you don't miss our daily uploads of carefully curated content that celebrates resilience, love, and justice, please subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. Each story we share is thoughtfully selected to touch hearts and provoke meaningful discussions. This story of family, courage, and systemic change deserves to reach those who might find hope in its message. If this narrative touched your heart or provided valuable insights, consider sharing it with your network. Your simple act of sharing could inspire someone who needs to hear this message of resilience and unconditional